I was quite happy 3 years ago when I was here and I actually met Wozniak. And I just wanted to really remember that moment with you all, where I gave him his book and he was like, "Oh, I must read this book." This was an amazing moment.
Oh, I must read this book.
Oh, thank you.
Maybe on the way home tomorrow. Yeah.
Can we take a photo?
Yeah.
Became a quote from Wozniak. He said it. It's on camera, right? So that's it. I have no idea if he really read it, but he was walking around with the book on his hands, which was really good. And since we were in a cinema, I thought I might as well show a small video to you to get started with this psychology of UX.
My name is Derren Brown, and the question we're considering is simple. Can we be manipulated through social pressure to commit murder?
70 people coming in here. They can't see this. Take them by the knees.
70 actors will be playing out a meticulously planned and rehearsed scenario to manipulate this man, who has no idea he's being filmed.
Come on, guys, what are we gonna do?
He's a millionaire. He's gonna make sure you go to jail.
This show is about how readily we hand over authorship of our lives every day.
Just give him one big push.
Can social compliance be used to make someone push a living, breathing human being to their death? Welcome to The Push.
Has anyone seen this here? The Push? No, but usually after the talk, people go straight to Netflix to look for it, which is amazing. Like it's a really good documentary on Netflix. So we're here to talk about decisions, right? And that documentary is about making a decision or influencing someone to make a decision to commit murder. 35,000 is the number of decisions we make every day. Did you know about that? It's a lot of decisions, right? It's almost like one decision every 2 seconds. Like 1, 2, you've just made a decision right now. And maybe the decision you just made right now is to do nothing and just keep doing whatever you were doing before, which is watching. And by the way, I was watching Fred's talk just before and I realized that these chairs, they do that. That's amazing. Like, feel free to just press the buttons on the right. It's first class. So feel free to relax and just do. Thank you so much for doing that. That's awesome. Yeah, so 35,000 decisions, right, we make every day. And have you ever imagined how many of those decisions are digital decisions? Decisions that you're making using a digital device, or sometimes you delegate that decision to the digital device to the point where you don't even think anymore. You're like, I don't want to make that decision. That's going to be my smartphone. My mobile device will make that decision for me, like a GPS device. Back in the days, we would know the way to go from point A to point B. We would just say, okay, turn right, turn left, turn right. Can you imagine taxi drivers like 30, 40, 50 years ago? They would have to know every single street. They would walk around with those like massive maps in the car. And right now, all we do is we say, I want to go to this place, take me there, and the GPS takes you there. So those are digital decisions that we don't have to think anymore. It just goes turn right, turn left, and you just follow the decision. But you can't follow the decisions blindly, right? Because these people, they were driving and the GPS kept telling them to go into the ocean, and they did. And when the cops came in, they were like, what happened? And they were like, I just followed the GPS. It told me to drive, and I kept driving, and I kept driving, and I ended up inside the ocean. So this is the insight I want to generate. Do we want to follow the digital nudges and the digital suggestions and the digital decisions without thinking? Some of them, perhaps, but we need critical thinking, right? And I know some of you come here to meet each other, not just to watch content and absorb content. So I want you to run a little 1-minute experiment with you. And I want you to do 3 things in 1 minute, right? So please stand up if you want to socialize and meet people. The 3 things in 1 minute are, I came up with this icebreaker called I Have a Dream. I was in Atlanta during Martin Luther King Day 2019, actually, and we were doing a bit of an exercise, and I was like, okay, let's do an exercise called I Have a Dream. And my dream at that time was, I have a dream that technologists would look at ethics and morals as the basis for everything that's done. So what I want you to do right now is find someone you don't know, say hi, my name is, and ask them, what is your dream? That in 1 minute. Cool, cool, cool. You can sit down now. Let's go back. Great, thanks everyone. The movie is about to start. Pick up your popcorn and... All right, so keep that. We'll use it at the end. Some of the things that you've just learned from each other right now, I want you to remember, and I also want you to remember your dream. We'll use that at the end of the talk. But before that, let me tell you a bit of a story. I started like falling in love with psychology because of this experiment. It was like the seed that planted in my mind the idea that psychology is interesting and it can be connected to technology. So this experiment comes from a book called Predictably Irrational from Dan Ariely. He talks about the magazine The Economist. They ran an experiment where they had 3 options of subscription of the magazine. One digital option for $59, one physical option for $125, and one which is both for $125. So you were presented with these 3 options, and then you would say, okay, which one am I going to buy? It turns out that the majority of people actually bought the 125 bundle, and nobody bought the 125 printed version. And why is that? You think, why am I going to buy a print version of something if I can have the print plus the digital for the same price? And that's very normal, like we would probably do the same. The interesting thing though is this option in the middle that nobody bought, they've removed that option. So they ran like an A/B test kind of thing with 2 groups of people. And then with the second group of people, they only showed the $59 digital version and the bundle. And you would assume, like, if we are all rational and if we feel like, oh, we make the same decision regardless of the options that I'm presented, the majority of the people would have chosen the bundle. But that's the opposite. The majority of the people buy the digital version for $59. So why is it that on the scenario 1, people buy the 125 more, and on the scenario 2, they buy the $59? Because of this option here in the middle, right? There is an option that makes the option on the right look better. And that option is called the decoy. The decoy is pretty much something that nudges you towards the direction of buying that. It is like really if I were like physically nudging you and going like, hey, look at that one, right? And there is actually a formula. If you have 2 options, A and B, and you want people to choose option B, you have to put A minus B option in the equation. So if you want to use that, I've used that many times in meetings because I was so frustrated. I would go to meetings and people would make the decisions which were not the decisions that I was recommending. And I was like, why didn't they choose my recommendation? Because I didn't know about those things. So when I do a presentation right now to a C-level, to someone that I need like budget for a project or something, I usually put a decoy in there, right? So you feel free to do that, but only if you're like trying to do something good, because the morals and the ethics behind what you're trying to do are really important here. So I was on a project at an insurance company in Australia, and they wanted to sell insurance direct to people without having a broker like sell. And there were too many options, like they could buy these 2 covers or those 3 covers or those covers. At the end of the day, there were like 511 options that people could buy. And what happened was, there was this person on the team, I guess at that time they didn't even call themselves like a UX or UI, it was just someone who was on the team who had an idea. They were like, what if we personalized the options, and instead of presenting any potential offer of the 511, what if we just said, here are the top 3 options that you can buy, depending on the person's profession, because it was insurance about the profession. So if they were a photographer, they would see those 3 options. If they were like a mechanic, then they would see those 3 options. It was amazing because they were doing what the experiment of The Economist was doing without knowing. So they were doing it unconsciously. So that was the moment when I've realized that there is a way to connect the two worlds of the human irrationality and user design and user experience and user interfaces in order to create ways to influence people to make the decisions that we feel or that the business or even their needs feel like they want to do it. That comes from the book Predictably Irrational from Dan Ariely. And Dan has a very easy way to explain what is that's going on in our brains. As you can see right there, the blue circle in the middle, it looks like it's slightly bigger on your right-hand side, but it's actually the same size, right? And this is just an optical illusion. Like, we know that optical illusions exist. We feel them, like we experience the optical illusion. We know it's the same, but we can't just unsee it. That one is one that really tricks my brain. When I look at square A and square B, they are the exact same color. They are the exact same shade of gray. But it doesn't look like it. Why? And why is that? Because around A, there is light. And around B, there is shade. So what is around us influences what we see. The same way that what is around the decisions we make influence the decisions we make. Like the 125 decoy solution that was in the middle, so it was like a shade influencing the way we make the decision. And then makes that correlation very intelligently in terms of saying that these things in our brain are like cognitive illusions. I like that word. And it's the word he gives to cognitive biases, pretty much. And there's a lot of cognitive biases mapped, and we all have them, right? It's amazing. We're all humans. Is anyone here not a human? Because if you're not, let me know. Even if you're not a human, you still have biases. There is a talk happening right now about algorithmic bias, which is amazing. We have biases, and we create technology with our biases, right? It's crazy. So there is a number that in Denmark it's 4%, and in Austria it's 99%. I asked that at a talk once, and people like, oh, that's the number of Austrians, right? What do you think that is? Since you're from Denmark, what is the number that here it's much lower than Austria? Any guesses? Sorry? German speaking? That could be maybe Portuguese speaking. I'm probably the only one in the room from Brazil. That's the number of organ donors. And that was a research also conducted by Dan Ariely on Predictably Irrational. And it turns out that I still don't know if now, in 2022, and it's actually something I want to discover and research, that being an organ donor is the default. Like, if you don't do anything, you just keep living your life, you do nothing, then you are an organ donor by default. Whereas in Austria, it's the other way around. You are not an organ donor, and you have to opt in. So that's the difference between an opt-out system and an opt-in system. In the opt-out system, you are something and you have to ask not to be. And in an opt-in system, you are not and you have to ask to be. It has to be what things like GDPR and laws say, that you need explicit consent for someone to do something about you. But do you agree that a default needs to exist? Because what if people don't say anything? You need to make a decision and say, the default is yes or no. You have to do it, right? And yeah, so that's the variation between countries. So Denmark is on one side, Austria, Belgium, France, and Hungary are on the side of the default being that you are not, that you are, sorry, and then it's much higher, the level of organ donors. I've just realized I might have said the whole thing reverse before, right? Yeah, it wasn't intentional. But that's why I was seeing like weird faces, people going like... No, it was intentional, just for the joke. No. Now you're gonna keep guessing, was it or was it not? So Dan Ariely, he created something called Behavioral Lab. And he had a role in an organization which is called Lemonade. It was an insurance company in the US, which received like a huge funding to reinvent insurance. And his role was, he was the CBO, the Chief Behavioral Officer. Does anyone work at a place here where you have a CBO? Do you work at a place where you have a CFO, Chief Financial Officer, CEO, CTO, CDO, Chief Digital Officer? So I guess when someone creates a C-level job, it means that they are giving so much relevance to that thing in the middle of the C something O, which it is like making a statement. And that company made a statement that human behavior, it's a big deal, and we want to learn more about it, and we want to run experiments. Fred was saying here that if you want to do something, just call it an experiment. So what better than having a behavioral lab where you can run experiments with people and learn things, right? So I ended up meeting Dan at a conference, and he's very approachable. I thought like he's one of the fathers of cognitive psychology, pretty much, and having the privilege to live in the same era that this person, it's fantastic. And he was like, at that time, it was in 2014, between 14 and 15, he was in Brazil for the World Cup. I think he's going to be in Qatar right now for the World Cup again. Yeah, and he became a bit of a coach in my life, a bit of a mentor, where when I had some questions, I would email him and he would respond to the email. He was really friendly, and I don't know if you know his story, if you've read, has anyone read any of Dan's books here? Cool. He went through a bit of a hard time in his young age when he was part of an explosion, that something exploded. He was probably running an experiment. And then he got burned, like a lot of his body was burned, so he can't type. So even like back in 2014-15, he would respond to emails with audio messages. And this is an example how like a 1-minute audio message just changes someone's life. At that moment, I was working for ThoughtWorks, just like Fred mentioned, and Agile was a big deal, right? Like 7 years ago, Agile was, it's still a big deal right now, but some people say it's dead, some people don't understand it anymore. I've been working with Agile since 2005, so at that time it was a big deal, and I was thinking about writing a book about cognitive psychology explaining Agile. I was giving some talks and people were like enjoying the connections that I made. I pretty much have something where I explain Scrum, all the Scrum practices using cognitive psychology. And then I messaged Dan about that, and he said, I think you're aiming too narrow in terms of just Agile. Like the digital world is something much bigger than just the methodology or the principles and values of Agile and the management side of Agile. And this is the audio that he sent me.
Hi, Fabio. So I think that the digital world has a few interesting changes. I'm sure that people think differently when they see a digital interface. And here you can even say that different digital interfaces are different. You could think about different chapters that each focuses on what is different from in this technology approach for good and for bad, and think about what you would do differently because of that. So let me know what you think. Bye.
Yeah, so that's a nudge. That's like a mentoring nudge, when you nudge someone into going in one direction other than going in the other direction. And looking back, I think it was a great thing because I started visualizing the world with a different perspective. So think about a form, and I was filling out a form once that said, there's a want missing there. I do not want to receive emails, right? So if you do nothing, what's going to happen? You will receive. And that is before GDPR, when you had to have explicit consent, and no one wants to keep clicking on, yes, I want to accept all the cookies. I get a lot of questions from family members and people who are not from technologies going like, what's about all these cookies? Because accepting the cookies are now an explicit thing. You have to accept them. Before the cookies were saved, then you didn't have to accept them explicitly. Right, so what happens? The one thing I want you to think is what happens on the do-nothing situation. Whatever you're doing, if you're publishing a website, or if you're writing a web application, or a mobile app, or anything that you're doing, there is always the do-nothing situation. The do-nothing situation is what the majority of the people will do. And think about that. Sometimes we come up with something and we ask people like 20, 30, 40 questions, and they just don't fill out the forms and the things that we want them to fill. But what if you could reduce those things, or maybe just ask the right questions at the right time? It would probably be a better user experience. So every time you're building any user interface, you are using the defaults and the do nothing, even without knowing. right? Because there is always the do nothing situation. And what about settings? If you buy a mobile phone, it comes up with the settings. If you download an app, it comes up with the default settings. Recently, I've realized that WhatsApp, which is one of the mostly used apps in Brazil, I don't know if you use it much here, but the WhatsApp came up with a default, which is people can add you to any group, even if you don't have them in your contact list. So by looking at that default, I was like, I'm going to change that default because I don't want to be added to a group. And then a bunch of people stopped adding me to groups that I didn't want to be added to because I went to the settings and I changed the default. So if you are a developer, you have a lot of defaults on your code, right? Those defaults are the things that the majority of the people will use. Because defaulting is one of the most powerful nudges that you can have with people. I use Uber a lot, and I was using Uber a few years ago, and then suddenly it showed up here, Uber Pool. So Uber Pool was a functionality that was introduced where you can share a ride with other passengers, right? So you're going to a similar place, then you have a ride with like 2 more people because they're going to go to the same direction as you. And then the Uber Pool came pre-selected by default. And then I was like, maybe the person, the UX or the UI person from Uber actually decided that deliberately. Or was it because it's the left-hand side and it was like by default, the default? I kept thinking if it was a conscious decision for people to say, because we want to nudge people into using the Uber pool, let's have the Uber pre-selected as the default. They could have had like non-selected. They could have had like nothing, and then I would have to select if I wanted the Uber pool, the Uber X, or the select. But no, they decided to have the Uber pool. And I like to talk a lot to Uber drivers, and one driver told me that there was this lady who came, and there was someone else in the car, and she was like, what's with this person here? And then he was like, ma'am, you just ordered the Uber pool? And she was like, I ordered what? What's Uber pool? So she, on the user side of things as well, it's very confusing because we don't read stuff. We probably open the app and we go like, I want to go to this place. We don't even look at what's pre-selected and we just click on request. And then suddenly we are making a decision unconsciously without knowing that we've just decided to buy something without knowing that we were buying that. If you go to Google right now and you search for where to eat in Copenhagen, there will be about 13 million results, right? And Google calculates that in 0.43 seconds, which is amazing. 9 in 10 people click on a result from the first page. So who made that decision? Was it me? Like if I decide to eat at a place in Copenhagen, did I make that decision or did the algorithm make that decision for me? I didn't make that decision. So we have that fake feeling of that we are making the decisions. We are not making the decisions anymore. Does anyone watch Netflix series here? By the way, I love to receive like tips of series, and I just watched Jeff Dahmer, which is the latest one that came up. So if you want to talk about it with me later on, come and talk about that. So if you're watching a TV show on Netflix and you finish episode 1, it just says next episode in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and it automatically plays for you. What is Netflix's goal is to keep you watching, right? To make you keep watching. Netflix CEO recently said that his biggest competitor, do you think, who is Netflix's biggest competitor? He said it's sleep, right? Because you are actually competing with people's sleep. So autoplay is a way that user experience and user design people use to make you keep doing something without you doing anything, right? It's using the do nothing, the default situation to make you keep watching. So the whole name of this talk is called The Psychology of UX, and let me explain you a little bit about psychology, right? Psychology is a big thing, right? It's not, we're not going to talk about psychotherapy or anything related to sitting down and telling all your dramas of life and resolving that. No. Inside the big area of psychology, there is something called cognitive psychology, right? And that's where we want to focus here. It's inside cognitive psychology. Behavioral economics, though, it is a science that uses cognitive psychology, neuroscience, and other areas to understand decisions and public choice, right? So that is the area that I really focus. And some of the most interesting books that I read, I would say it is the top 3 books on the area. It is Thinking Fast and Slow, Predictably Rational, and Nudge. Those are usually the 3 books that people talk about when they talk about behavioral economics or behavioral science, which is what the area is called too. So stereotyping, we spoke a lot about the default. Stereotyping is another bias of the humans, right? We stereotype, we make fast decisions, and that's very much explained on the Thinking Fast and Slow book. And let me ask you something. I've lived in Australia for a while, for 8 years, and if I say the word Australia, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Just say it out loud. I definitely heard kangaroos as the most, right? So I've heard other things like spiders, the opera house, but kangaroos is definitely the one thing. So could I have read your brains right now and just figured out that you were going to say kangaroos by having that photo there? Because of the stereotype, we create shortcuts in our minds. So if I wanted you to say the word kangaroo, I would say Australia, and then you would say kangaroo. And you'd go like, wow, he hypnotized me or something. No, we just understand how the brain works, right? And there's a lot more in Australia other than kangaroos, but there are kangaroos, yeah. And that was an amazing time. But you know what's interesting? That in Australia, and I guess here as well, because we're all humans, unless you're not human, they also make stereotypes of Brazilians. They think that all Brazilians can play soccer, football, and I'm horrible at it. So people would say like, hey, invite Fabio to the team, and I would just suck at it. And people would go, why did we invite that? Some people think that Rio is the capital, whereas it's not. The capital is called Brasilia. But when I went to Australia, I also thought Sydney was the capital, and it's Canberra. But the one thing that people know about Brazil, and it's very true, it's all the beaches. Like, it's an amazing place to go and spend some holiday. And Pelé is a soccer player in Brazil. You mustn't have heard about Pelé. So if I say the word Pelé, the first thing that comes to mind is the soccer player. But what about, I don't know, what if someone's cousin is called Pelé? Is he going to think about the cousin or about Pelé? And that's a shortcut. It's like the Australia kangaroo, Pelé, soccer player, right? People think about that. And my name is Fabio, right? And the weird thing is when I arrived in Australia, every time I would say my name was Fabio, people would laugh. And I didn't understand why, so I want to understand now if here in Denmark as well, if that's one thing. Because in Australia, there was this guy who was very famous. His name was Fabio. No one would name any child Fabio because of this guy here. Like, he was really famous. And he was this Italian supermodel that everyone would talk about him. But you see the stereotype? What I'm trying to do here is to show you that there is a connection that we make in our brains, and sometimes that connection is cultural. In one part of the world, there is the connection. In other parts of the world, there isn't the connection. I tried to look like him, but that was the closest I got. This was actually one of the GOTO conferences. I think it was GOTO Chicago 2020. We were doing it remote. It was right in the middle of the pandemic, and yeah, and then I made that joke, but I put on the real wig and showed. So we spoke about predictably rational default. We spoke about thinking fast and slow, the stereotyping and the fast brain. Now let me talk a little bit about Nudge, which is another of the top 3 books on behavioral science. It's written by Thaler and Sunstein. Thaler actually got the Nobel Prize in 2017 because of his connections with economics and psychology, which is fantastic because he connected 2 areas that weren't connected in a way that no one had ever done it before. So I'm a huge fan of Thaler. And his definition of a nudge is that nudges are small and powerful interventions in the environments where we make decisions. So what happened was, when you nudge someone, just nudge someone on your side right there. Just go and do a bit of a nudge there. Don't push them. Hang on. They just threw someone out of the chair. Yeah, so a nudge is there a word here for nudge? Because in Portuguese it's very hard to translate because you have push and you have touch, but nudge, it's something in the middle that it's very hard to translate. What about here? Do you have a word for nudge? Kaitil? I'll try to pronounce that after. Just come and do some mentoring coaching with me. Maybe I can So I became so passionate about a concept that I call digital nudge. I wrote the book. I've even tattooed in my arm, right, this nudging of a robotic hand, which is sometimes even invisibly nudging us towards making a decision. Right? And as I was saying, in Portuguese, it's hard to translate nudge, and someone came on my talk and they were like, oh, now I know what you're saying, because I thought you were going to talk about nudes. And then they even took a photo of me that was cutting the G, so it was digital nudes, right? If you go on Google and you search for Fabio Nudge, a lot of stuff will come, so if you want to learn a bit more about the concept, there will be a lot of talk. Do not search about Fabio nude, because otherwise that guy might show up, right? But yeah, I was writing, tomorrow we'll have a masterclass on this, and I was writing a document about the masterclass, and then suddenly Google Docs had this message saying, suggested spelling. You are seeing this suggestion because your document local is set to British English, so it was nudging me. He was giving me a recommendation if I should change organization to use an S instead of a Z. And then I was like, that's a nudge, so I'm going to put it in the presentation and actually show. It is an interesting nudge because it was like a good way to correct something. But there are much better nudges that actually can solve much bigger problems in the world. Just like a continuous glucose monitoring system that can nudge someone who has diabetes into having their insulin. I had a friend, Greg, and he told me that he was in meetings and he had one of those, and he was saying, before I had one of those, I was in meetings and I was constantly thinking, what am I feeling? Should I take my insulin right now? Should I eat something? And then after he installed that on his body, he was like, wow, this is so much better because I can focus on the right things and I can delegate that decision to a device who will tell me when I need to do something. So isn't that amazing that we can actually use the digital nudges for good? And remember that movie where the little boy would see dead people? I started being that boy, but I started seeing biases. And a cognitive bias is like the ones we just spoke. The stereotype, the default, it is a bias, the status quo bias, are all like little bugs in our brain, right? And I kept seeing it, even like without the beard, with the beard. That was me. That was still me, and I keep seeing it. The status quo bias is one that we just spoke right now. Status quo bias is the one about the default. It's the tendency that humans have to keep doing whatever they were doing, like status quo. It's like inertia. We tend to keep doing whatever we're doing because we don't want to put energy. But there are so many more biases that have been mapped. Right now, it's actually over 200 biases that have been mapped. So can you imagine if we could leverage some of those biases in order to hack people's brains and influence them to make decisions? And that's what I call the power of UX design. If you are a UX designer or if you are influencing someone to make a decision, you have a huge power in your hands. The behavior economics people call the decision architects, people who are actually architecting the environments of decisions. And the UX people are the digital decision architects. Not just necessarily the UX, but even if you're a product owner, you are influencing someone's decisions. So you have that power in your hands to change a lot of what's being developed. I like that quote that says that a designer who doesn't understand human psychology is going to be no more successful than an architect who doesn't understand physics. Amazon has patented something called anticipatory shipping, which is they will send you something before you buy it. Right? So they will understand your behavior online and they will figure out that you want to buy that item, and then they will ship it to you. It will arrive and you might say, okay, I didn't want it. So there will be something saying like, if you don't want it, you can return it. But think about the power of the default. Like, you buy something by default. By doing nothing, you just bought something. And then because of the tendency that we have to just keep doing nothing, we probably will not return it because the effort of returning something, it's much bigger than the doing nothing. I quite like the experience of Amazon Go, which is a place where you can just walk in, get your stuff, and walk out. Pretty much a just walk out situation, which is an amazing way also to apply the do-nothing situation and to remove what's called friction from the decision-making environment. Right? Seamless experience, it's one experience that it's one of the trends of the moment, is to create an experience where you have the minimum friction possible. There is a book called Friction. I totally recommend reading that book as well, which talks about all these little frictions that you have. And by the way, after this talk, we'll have a book signing for my book, and I try to create a seamless experience where you can just walk into the reception and get a book from Mariah and just come to me and I'll sign the book, and then you can pay later. I think Mariah will kill me for that because she will actually expect you to pay for it. But just pay later, like leave your name with her and then you can pay later. It's okay. So I can actually have a seamless experience with you. And this is like the opposite of a seamless experience, right? Let me show you. This is live, like. And Gatorade was probably sponsoring the event. Okay, yeah, finish like a wizard that we're filling online, and yeah, we've just finished. Has anyone seen the robot that was released recently by Tesla? It's called the Optimus. That was like this week, and I thought I could put something here to show you. It is using the same technology or similar technology to autonomous cars, and it will be sold by less than $20,000, so cheaper than a car. And they've just published that, and I think that's a huge revolution. Just like the Tesla's cars have been, I guess that's gonna be a huge revolution. I think it's gonna dance. Just waving. Yeah, but all these new technologies are coming up, right? So VR, AR, they are not new, but they've just crossed the chasm of the people who were the innovators and the beginners, and now a lot more people are using it, and it's also becoming much cheaper. So Alibaba created a VR experience where you can buy stuff online by putting on the goggle, the whatever VR equipment you have, and then you look at something and you buy it. Can you imagine how amazing you look at it? And probably if you look at it for like 2 seconds, you've bought it, right? Bought. It's unbelievable. Augmented reality is another technology that it's very powerful as well, and it will nudge people into making decisions in a different way. So I quite like that one, because then you can see how the clothes will look at you, will look on you, and then you can probably make the decision of buying that straight away. That one I really like because I've moved apartments recently, and I would have loved to have seen my apartment in how it would be before it was actually built, right? So that is very cool as well. So you can visit a place even before the place has been built. That's from 2018. 4 years ago, I was already trying that stuff, and I was literally like upside down on a VR experience. So I quite like to experiment new things and try new things and understand what's going on with technology. Back to ThougX as well, my colleague. I'm really happy I met you here from a colleague from ThoX. I used to work for ThoX for 10 years, and this was an event that we were in Singapore where we were showcasing something called Smart Mirror, right? And that was, I guess, 2014 or 15. Alexa, start the bank.
How can I help you today?
Alexa, show me my balance.
You have $3,390 in your current account.
So very, very much futuristic, right? Thinking about what technology can do. And then Black Mirror came along. Has anyone seen this TV show here, the TV series Black Mirror? When I was watching that episode, I was like, wow, that is like a smart mirror, right? It's definitely the place where you can wake up and brush your teeth and probably make decisions on the mirror. Right after that, something shows up on the mirror, which I cut because I don't want to show it here, but if you watch it online, you will see what shows up. It is something for him to buy it. It's definitely like, I buy this. And so, yeah, but experiences are really important, right? UX means user experience. And if I'm providing something to you right now, I want to provide a great experience. What I really want to have is to walk away of this room today and say, I had an amazing experience with this talk right now. Content is something you can find online. You can just download stuff and consume it on your own, read a book, watch a movie, but it's all about the experience. And now, as you know, at the end of every good movie, there is a spoiler alert about the next movie, right? So the spoiler alert here is about the decisions we make online. In 60 seconds, this is the number of things that happen online, right? It's a lot that happen. I've been following this graph since 2016. It's called the Internet Minute. And just to give you an example, right? In 2016, in 1 minute, 900,000 people would swipe on Tinder. And right now it's 2 million, right? So that's just one of the data points that we have there. But we are doing more online. The tendency is that we're sending and receiving more emails, more text messages, watching more things on streaming. It's pretty much happening more and more. I was visiting the MIT, and then at the MIT there was this fire hydrant, and it was saying that trying to absorb all the content from the MIT, it's like trying to drink water from the fire hydrant. It's impossible, right? What's going to happen to you? We'll end up like that, right? And do you feel like the world is a little bit like that right now? Do you feel like there's so much online, there's so much information, there's so much stuff that we would like to consume, but we don't have the capacity to consume that? It's so many like online courses and things that we can read, and we have access to all the information that we can, but it's almost impossible to read and to consume all that. So on the Digital Nudge book, I mentioned that the digital content nutritionist, it could be a job that can also be called a content curating. I made an analogy that curating content, it's like creating an information diet. And then I started evolving on that concept. And the next book that's coming up in 2023, it's going to be called Infobesity, which is exactly about the information overload that we are receiving right now and how to cope with it, how to create an information diet where we can actually be healthy and have a better life. So thank you so much. Looking forward to the Infobesity.
Thank you, Fabio. I've been asked to go a couple of minutes over time here to even out the traffic.
So if we can, I have like a 3-minute video I'd like to show at the end.
Let's see it.
Should I show it now and then questions? Cool. So let me just show you this last. I was actually thinking, because Oliver said that we might had some time. And at 1 p.m. soon we'll have the book signing, but I just want to wrap up with this video here. Yeah.
Architects of our digital world, stop. Be better, because we can be. And we can see that these systems have been designed with intricacy so that companies can keep our attention indefinitely. I don't want to keep crushing these freaking candies. I don't want these alerts to completely command me. I don't care if that panda bear is dancing. Well, maybe. With a hula hoop. Okay, this is fantastic. I have to share this with my 10 friends and 10,000 strangers. Caption, who wants to throw a panda rager? Great, let me go back about my life. For God's sakes, I'm trying to right swipe my wife. Huh. 30 seconds and just 2 Facebook likes. Or is that just 2 for which I've been notified? Let me go back and check inside and see whose likes I tried to hide. They don't show them all, I wonder why. This panda's dancing. And another video plays after automatically. This one of a gopher that stage turns dramatically. It's like my attention is kept systematically raptured by algorithms that know exactly what I want. Or not what I want, just what I'll watch. And the people behind this intelligent design genuinely want to better our lives. But their bonuses just so happen to be tied to keeping time on site exceptionally high. And now even my news apps have been gamified, and what am I, not gonna click that one simple sex tip guaranteed to blow her mind? Wait, where was I, and why have I forgotten to look for that thing I'm supposed to find? And my God, look at the time. It is shocking. But somehow, yes, Netflix, I am still watching. And I know. I should have more self-control. But just to be clear, you just spent $1 million telling me this story designed to cut off at the end, leaving me wanting more. See, of course I want to see what you have in store. See my cursor already waiting there on the screen floor as you tease the next hour in all of its glory. And you'll give it to me, unless I actively abort. See, it seems the decision's already made for me. The countdown clock's moving. There it goes. 5, 4, 3. I need to sleep. But you made me want this more. This is not what I consciously signed up for when I hit play on one episode 6 hours ago. Architects of our digital world, you have more data, information, and control over our attention, the tools to tweak our emotions so we'll return to your experience. But is that what you should do? Or should you build digital tools so advanced they can actually enhance the world outside the device in our hands? Can you add so much value that it lets us put our phones back in our pants as fast as we possibly can? Not time-sucking, time-giving innovation. That's what it means to be truly technologically advanced. The future is not all screens. It's humanity enhanced.
Woo! Humanity enhanced. And let me just wrap up by telling them one of my dreams as well. I want to be a billionaire, but I don't want to have $1 billion or anything. I want to impact the lives of 1 billion people. Just like Dan Ariely, Eckhart Tolle, Nir Eyal, Preben, they all have impacted my life in a certain way. So if I have impacted your life a tiny little bit, if you walk out today a little bit impacted and changed, and if what you do in your next days and years will be a slightly different towards good, I've already achieved my dream today. Thank you so much.